Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Jason was finishing up the dinner dishes when Lauren appeared in the kitchen with that look he knew all too well. It was the same expression she wore whenever she wanted to bring up something serious, something she'd rehearsed in her head many times before saying it out loud. He dried his hands slowly, bracing himself for what was coming, but nothing could have prepared him for the words that actually left his wife's mouth. Lauren started by talking about personal growth, how she'd been reading relationship articles and listening to podcasts that explored alternative models of commitment. She mentioned couples who'd strengthened their bond by trying temporary freedoms, saying traditional monogamy sometimes stifled individuality. Jason just listened, watching how carefully she chose each word, as if she were pitching a business proposal rather than suggesting they both officially cheat on each other. According to Lauren, the idea was simple. They'd have 3 months of total freedom, no questions asked, no judgments. After that period, they'd come back to each other with renewed experiences and a more mature perspective on what they shared. She spoke with forced enthusiasm about rediscovery, claiming this could save their marriage before routine swallowed them whole. Jason stayed silent for a long time after she finished, studying the face of the woman he'd married 4 years earlier. Something felt off about her proposal. It wasn't just the absurd content, it was how she delivered it. She was too nervous, too anxious for his response. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her teacup, and her eyes kept darting away whenever Jason tried to meet her gaze. He knew his wife well enough to spot when she was hiding something. His gut screamed that this request wasn't really about growth or strengthening their bond, it was about justifying something that was probably already happening. Jason took a deep breath and said he needed time to think. Lauren seemed disappointed by the lack of an immediate answer, but she agreed, saying it was an important decision and he should reflect carefully. That night, lying beside her in bed, Jason barely slept. His mind raced, reviewing the past few months for signs he might have missed. And the more he thought about it, the more puzzle pieces started falling into place. Lauren had changed her routine about 2 months earlier. She'd started going to the gym more often, bought new clothes, and spent excessive time on her phone. She'd smile at the screen with an expression Jason hadn't seen directed at him in a long time. When he asked who she was texting, Lauren would vaguely mention work friends or online discussion groups. At the time, Jason had accepted those explanations, trusting her as he always had. Now, that trust felt like naivety. The next morning, while Lauren was in the shower, Jason picked up the laptop they both shared. His heart pounded as he opened the browser history. Lauren was usually careful, but sometimes she forgot to clear her tracks. That's how Jason found the first thread of the unraveling. There were searches about open relationships, forum posts about how to convince reluctant partners, and articles on emotional manipulation disguised as personal growth. Every link he clicked felt like another stab to the trust he was still trying to hold on to. But it was when he accessed her secondary email account, one she rarely mentioned, that Jason uncovered the full truth. The messages dated back 6 weeks. The sender was someone named Trevor, whom Jason quickly recognized as Lauren's coworker at the digital marketing firm where she worked. The early messages seemed innocent enough, discussions about projects and deadlines, but they gradually grew more personal, more intimate. Jason read every message with a mix of nausea and tightly controlled anger. Trevor and Lauren had developed something beyond a professional friendship. There was blatant flirting, suggestive photos, and plans for lunchtime meetups. And then, in the most recent messages, Jason found something that made his blood run cold. Trevor and Lauren were discussing exactly how she should present the open relationship idea to Jason. There was a detailed script, complete with philosophical arguments and references to studies she was supposed to cite. It had all been meticulously planned. What made it even worse was discovering Trevor's true nature. In one message, Lauren asked if he was sure his wife wouldn't find out. Trevor replied with arrogant confidence that his wife, Amanda, was too naive to suspect anything. He casually mentioned he'd done this before, that he had a pattern of seducing coworkers. But there was something even more disturbing in the following messages. Jason discovered that Trevor didn't just systematically cheat on his wife, he also kept secret records of encounters and conversations without the women's knowledge. In messages to Lauren, he suggested they could keep memories of what they did together, as if it were just a private secret between them. Lauren hesitated at first, but Trevor was persuasive, saying it would be something just for them, a way to make everything more special. Jason felt repulsed as he read it. Continuing his investigation, Jason found references to online platforms where Trevor, under a pseudonym, commented on having secretly recorded other women. Lauren clearly didn't know about this. She believed any records would stay secret between her and her lover. Her naivety about Trevor was almost as great as Jason's had been about her. Both had been deceived, but in different ways. The difference was that Jason now held all the cards. He copied everything, every message, every photo, every piece of evidence of betrayal and manipulation. Jason created a hidden folder in a cloud drive and meticulously organized all the material. Then he cleared his own browsing history and closed the laptop exactly as he'd found it. When Lauren stepped out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair still damp, Jason was making coffee as if nothing had happened. That afternoon, Jason contacted a family law attorney. He brought all the digital evidence and explained the situation in clinical detail, keeping his emotions under control. The lawyer, a middle-aged man named Richard, listened with a neutral expression before offering his advice. The evidence was solid and could give Jason a significant advantage in divorce proceedings. But there was more to consider, especially regarding Trevor's habit of recording women without their knowledge. Richard suggested Jason also consult a criminal attorney to assess the legal implications of Trevor's behavior. Distributing any kind of personal recording without consent was a crime, and if it could be proven he'd been doing this with other women, the situation would be even graver. Jason agreed, but before taking any legal action, he wanted to confront Lauren. He wanted her to understand exactly how deeply she'd been manipulated and betrayed, not just by herself, but also by the man she'd secretly trusted. Jason carefully planned his next steps. He couldn't just reveal he knew everything. He needed more. He needed to ensure Lauren fully exposed herself, leaving no room for excuses or backtracking. So he decided to accept her proposal. When Lauren came home that night, Jason was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a calm expression, copier. He told her he'd thought deeply about her request and admitted he'd been shaken at first. But after serious reflection, he claimed she might be right, that maybe they really did need this experience to appreciate what they had. Lauren lit up, hugging him with an enthusiasm Jason found sickening. She talked about how good this would be for both of them, how they'd emerge stronger from this journey. Jason just smiled and nodded, while inside he was already calculating every next move. In the days that followed, Jason watched Lauren transform completely. She became lighter, more animated, convinced she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Her messages to Trevor intensified, and Jason kept discreetly monitoring everything. The two began planning bolder meetings now that Lauren believed she had carte blanche. Trevor bragged about how easily he'd manipulated her, how she'd walked right into his trap. He even mentioned he had new recording equipment ready for their next encounters. That's when Jason put his plan into action. Through social media, he discovered that Amanda, Trevor's wife, worked as a nurse at a nearby hospital. Jason sent her an anonymous message, including enough screenshots to get her attention. He didn't reveal his identity at first, just planted the seed of doubt. Amanda replied, confused and distraught, asking for more information. Jason provided a secure email address where she could reach out. When Amanda wrote to that email, Jason identified himself. He explained who he was, what he'd uncovered, and showed her all the evidence. Amanda was devastated but also furious. She confirmed Trevor had done this before and that she'd suspected new episodes but never had concrete proof. Now, with everything documented, she could finally act. Jason proposed an alliance. They would confront Trevor and Lauren together, at a strategically chosen moment. The human resources department at the company where Lauren and Trevor worked also needed to know. Jason anonymously contacted HR, sending evidence of messages exchanged during work hours using company equipment. He included screenshots clearly showing the relationship was interfering with the professional environment and violating the company's code of conduct. HR immediately opened an internal investigation. Jason booked a dinner at an upscale restaurant for him and Lauren the following Friday. He told her he wanted to celebrate their new chapter, to make it clear he supported her decision and that they both deserved this special moment. Lauren accepted, delighted and unsuspecting. She wore a new dress she'd bought specifically to impress Trevor and arrived beaming. Jason complimented her, watching as she could barely contain her excitement. What Lauren didn't know was that Amanda would also be there. And that Jason's lawyer would have documents ready. And that everything was about to collapse in a way she could never have anticipated. When they arrived at the restaurant, Jason led Lauren to a reserved table in a quiet corner. They ordered drinks and made small talk for a few minutes. Lauren was relaxed, smiling, convinced this evening marked her victory. That's when Jason glanced toward the entrance and gave a subtle wave. Amanda walked in, accompanied by her own attorney. Lauren went pale when she recognized Amanda approaching. She looked at Jason with growing confusion, trying to understand what was happening. Amanda stopped beside the table, staring directly at Lauren with a mix of pain and contempt. Jason then broke the silence with a calm, almost polite voice. "Lauren, you know Amanda, don't you? Trevor's wife." Lauren tried to stammer something, but Jason raised a hand, asking her to be quiet. He pulled a tablet from the bag beside his chair and placed it on the table. On the screen were screenshots of messages between Lauren and Trevor, explicit texts, compromising photos, detailed plans. Lauren reached for the tablet, but Jason quickly pulled it away. "I know everything," Jason said, his voice still eerily controlled. "I know about Trevor. I know how you two planned this open relationship story. I know about the weeks of betrayal before you even had the nerve to ask my permission for what you were already doing. But you know what's more interesting, Lauren? You don't know everything about Trevor." Jason slid the tablet back, now showing different conversations, messages from Trevor to other women, screenshots of forum posts where he hinted at keeping secret recordings without consent, references to recording equipment. Lauren read with wide eyes, her face draining of all color. Her hands shook as she held the tablet. "He was recording everything without telling you," Amanda said, her voice breaking slightly but staying firm. "Everything you did together, he saved in hidden files. And it wasn't just for personal keepsakes. My husband has been illegally and disrespectfully recording other women without their knowledge. You weren't special to him, Lauren. You were just another target." Lauren dropped the tablet as if it burned her hands. Tears began streaming down her face, smearing her carefully applied makeup. She looked at Jason, trying to speak, trying to explain herself, but no words came out. Jason just watched her with an expression that mixed disappointment and something close to pity. "Your company's legal department already knows everything," Jason continued. "The messages during work hours, the inappropriate relationship with a coworker, the use of company resources for personal purposes, they opened a formal investigation this morning. I think you'll get an official notice on Monday." Lauren finally found her voice, but all that came out was a desperate, tearful, "Jason, please." He slowly shook his head. "You asked me for temporary freedom, Lauren. But what you really wanted was permission to keep doing what you were already doing behind my back. You completely underestimated me. You thought I was naive enough to accept your manipulation disguised as personal growth and new forms of commitment." Jason pulled an envelope from the same bag and placed it on the table next to the tablet. "Here are the divorce papers. My lawyer already prepared them. With the evidence I have, you won't be entitled to practically anything. The house stays with me, along with most of our shared assets. You betrayed trust in a premeditated and documented way. Lauren tried to protest, claiming they could work it out, that it had been a terrible mistake, that she never meant to hurt him. Jason just laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You spent 6 weeks planning how to manipulate me. You rehearsed every word of your open relationship speech. You didn't make a mistake, Lauren. You made conscious, deliberate choices. And now you'll face the consequences of those choices. Amanda added, looking at Lauren with steel in her eyes, Trevor is facing not only divorce but also possible criminal charges. Distributing someone's personal recordings without consent is a crime, especially when it's done repeatedly and secretly. And you appear in some of that material, Lauren. You were used to, whether you realize it now or not. Lauren began sobbing uncontrollably. Other restaurant guests started glancing their way, sensing something dramatic was unfolding. Jason signaled the waiter, paid the bill in advance, and stood up from his chair. He looked at Lauren one last time before leaving. Good luck, Lauren. You're going to need it. Jason and Amanda left the restaurant together, leaving Lauren sitting alone at that table, surrounded by evidence of her betrayal and manipulation, facing the complete collapse of everything she'd built. People nearby whispered, curious about what could have caused such a scene. Lauren covered her face with her hands, unable to move, unable to process the magnitude of disaster her life had become in just a few minutes. In the weeks that followed, everything unfolded exactly as Jason had predicted. The company's HR department concluded its investigation, and both Lauren and Trevor were fired for violating the professional code of conduct. Trevor faced criminal charges related to secret recordings and privacy violations, and several other women began coming forward as victims after the news quietly spread. Lauren tried to defend herself, spreading distorted versions of the story to friends and family. She claimed Jason had cheated first, that she'd been driven to desperation, that it was all one massive misunderstanding. But Jason had all the evidence, all the messages, the full documented timeline. Every lie Lauren told was quickly debunked with concrete proof. Her credibility evaporated completely. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. The judge reviewed the evidence presented by Jason's legal team and had no doubts when deciding how to divide assets. Lauren walked away from the marriage with practically nothing but a few clothes and personal items. The house, the car, their joint savings, all stayed with Jason. She tried arguing she deserved compensation for years of dedication to the relationship, but her premeditated betrayal weighed decisively against her. Lauren's family, initially supportive, changed their stance once Jason presented the full evidence. Even her own parents were embarrassed by her behavior. Her younger brother, who'd always been close to Jason, even sent a message apologizing on the family's behalf. Mutual friends picked sides, and most stood with Jason. Lauren found herself isolated, without a job, without a reputation, without support. Trevor faced even harsher consequences. Beyond divorce and job loss, he was formally criminally charged. Amanda fully cooperated with authorities, handing over computers and storage devices Trevor had kept at home. The investigation revealed recordings made without consent from at least 8 women over 3 years. The case drew local media attention, and Trevor became a public example of someone who used technology to violate others' privacy. For Lauren, the revelation about those secret recordings was perhaps the most devastating blow. Knowing that moments she believed were private and meaningful had been secretly archived, and possibly exposed without her knowledge, shattered what little self-worth she had left. She sought therapy, trying to process the double betrayal of having cheated on her husband while being cheated on herself. Her therapist gently suggested that Lauren needed to take responsibility for her own choices before she could truly heal. Jason, on the other hand, found an unexpected peace after the confrontation. His initial anger gave way to a sense of relief. He'd uncovered Lauren's true nature before wasting more years of his life. The apartment he'd kept after the divorce was quiet, but not lonely. It was a calm quiet, free of hidden lies and false displays of affection masking betrayal. He stayed in occasional contact with Amanda, who was also rebuilding her life after divorcing Trevor. They formed an unlikely friendship, bound by the shared experience of being betrayed by people they'd trusted. Amanda once remarked that Jason had been braver than her, that he'd acted quickly and decisively while she'd ignored warning signs for years. Jason replied that courage was relative, that he simply couldn't pretend not to know after discovering the truth. 6 months after the restaurant confrontation, Jason ran into Lauren by chance at a supermarket. She looked noticeably different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, her hair no longer carefully styled. Lauren hesitated when she saw him, clearly debating whether to approach or walk away. Jason made the decision for her, offering a polite nod but continuing on his way without stopping. There was nothing left to say. The past was closed, archived alongside all those messages and evidence that had sealed her fate. Lauren watched Jason walk away, carrying his groceries with the upright posture of someone who'd moved on. She wanted to call out to him, to try once more to explain or apologize, but the words died in her throat. She knew there was no forgiveness possible for what she'd done. No magic words could undo the manipulation, the betrayal, the fundamental breach of trust. Lauren turned and left the store empty-handed, unable to focus on something as mundane as shopping while facing the ghost of everything she'd lost. That afternoon, driving home, Jason reflected on how life has strange ways of exposing truths. Lauren's seemingly progressive request for an open relationship had, in reality, been the key that unlocked all her lies. If she'd simply continued cheating in secret, Jason might never have found out. But her arrogance, her belief that she could manipulate him into accepting the unacceptable, became her own undoing. He parked the car and carried his groceries inside, methodically putting everything away in the kitchen. The house was clean and orderly, a reflection of his newly structured life. Jason wasn't actively looking for a new relationship, but he wasn't closed off to the possibility either. The difference was that now he knew exactly what signs to watch for, what questions to ask, how not to confuse pretty words with genuine intentions. The trap Lauren had set for him became the very trap that caught her. By asking permission for what she was already doing, by trying to legitimize her betrayal through rehearsed philosophical arguments, she'd handed Jason every tool he needed to completely dismantle her. And he'd done exactly that, not out of cruelty, but out of a fundamental need for justice. That night, Jason sat on his couch with a glass of whiskey, looking out the window at the city lights below. He thought about how people often underestimate those they love, assuming that love means blindness or weakness. Lauren had made that fatal mistake. She'd seen Jason's kindness as naivety, his trust as stupidity, his love as something that could be twisted and manipulated without consequence. But Jason had shown there's a vast difference between being good and being foolish, between trusting and being blind, between loving and being a doormat. He'd given Lauren all the rope she needed, and she'd willingly, enthusiastically hanged herself with it. The irony wasn't lost on Jason. The request for special freedom that was supposed to liberate Lauren ended up being exactly what trapped her in the consequences of her own choices. And while Lauren struggled to rebuild a life destroyed by her own hands, while Trevor faced the legal fallout from his crimes, Jason simply lived. He worked, spent time with friends, explored new hobbies, and existed without the constant weight of undiscovered lies. There was a lightness to his life now, a kind of authenticity that had been missing during the final months of his marriage, though he hadn't realized it at the time. Jason and Lauren's story became a whispered cautionary tale among mutual acquaintances, a reminder that actions have consequences, that manipulation eventually turns on the manipulator, and that truth has a persistent way of emerging no matter how many layers of deception are built over it. And that underestimating someone based on their kindness might be the most dangerous mistake anyone can make. Jason finished his whiskey and went to bed, his conscience clear and his future open. He'd turned betrayal into liberation, pain into wisdom, and her trap into her own prison. And that, he thought as he turned off the light, was justice in its purest and most deserved form. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.